Excuse me.
There's more down
Just as I am.
Just as I am, without one plea,
But that thy blood. You want to start again?
313. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh.
It looks like the same one, sweetheart. It's not.
Just as I am, without one plea, but that thy blood was shed for me, and that thou bidst me come to thee, O Lamb of God, I come, just as I am, and waiting on to rid my soul of one dark blot, to thee whose blood can cleanse each spot, O Lamb of God, I come. We'll do the last. Just as I am, thy love I own has broken every barrier down. Now to be thine and thine alone, O Lamb of God, I come, I come.
So beautiful.
Walt, come bless us one more time. Thank you.
Is there someone can figure out why this thing wouldn't go full screen?
Well, he's kind of left us hanging on the 8 kids that you went hunting after yesterday. We don't know if you found them or not. It's most of them driving straight.
Ah. We found them. We found them. We use something called lost person behavior. And it's amazing. It's a lot of, just thousands and thousands and thousands of cases of people being lost. And you look at it based on age, diagnosis, and what they're doing. And it usually will tell you, right where they are, because human behavior is very similar. And you know that from working with the mind. And so you look at what that person's prone to do, and you go to there and you find them. It's amazing. Does anybody know how to make this go full screen? It's not doing it for me. Let's try this one. There it goes. Good. Excellent. So, did y'all enjoy Vittles? Weren't they good? I enjoyed camaraderie. I had a lot of fun. Thank y'all. It was fun. Optimal immunity and how to achieve it. Why is the immune system important? It does make you feel well and fights disease and keeps you going. From a spiritual standpoint, why is optimal immunity important? Get my. It will? Pardon? It does. A well mind understands better. But pardon? Yeah? Let me look at something else here. Let's look at 1 Corinthians 6. $19. 1 Corinthians 6, 19. Can someone read that? 19 and 20. No, go ahead, sir.
Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God, and that you're not your own? For you have been bought for a price. Therefore glorify God in your body.
So why do we want to keep our immune system up? Pardon? Glorify God. It's not our body. This body here doesn't belong to me. So that person says, I can smoke if I want to. You just leave me alone. It's my body. I can do whatever with it I want. Is that scriptural? Now, let's go to 1 Corinthians 3. And look over there. Can someone read 16 and 17? Who's got it? You got it, Randy?
Do not know that you're, let's see,
Keeps asking you to move your mic up about 3 inches.
Do you not know that you are the temple of God, that the Spirit of God dwells in you? If anyone defiles the temple of God, God will destroy him. For the temple of God is holy, which temple you are.
God will do what? Destroy. So, it's kind of like you taking care of somebody's house that's not yours, and you're just a caretaker. You can't just go messing the house up. You've got to take care of it. Well, our bodies got caught when? At the cross. So, it's not ours. And if we don't take care of it, God will destroy it. How's it to get destroyed? Through disease. So let's look at optimal immunity. Before then, I'd like to look at an interesting quote that sometimes people get confused on. Now, this kind of ruffles the feathers of some people sometimes. But let's just see what it has to say. There's some things in the Bible ruffles people's feathers sometimes. But let's read this and see what it says. When physicians understand physiology in its truest sense, their use of drugs will be much less, and finally, they will cease to use them at all. The physician who depends upon drug medication in his practice shows that he does not understand physiology, understand the delicate machinery of the human organism, which is physiology. So what does that mean? Does that mean that we just plumb stop medication? No, that is not at all what it means. When I worked in the first 20 years, I never saw a care plan that said reversing diabetes. It was diabetic management through pharmaceuticals. That's type 2 I'm speaking on. When I left regular health care, I went to a place that had figured out the physiology to reverse type 2 diabetes. And we're talking very seldom on type 2, we don't see reversal. Last time I went, I don't know if I mentioned this. I may have mentioned it last night. I don't remember. Did I talk about the diabetes when I went to Africa. And the last time I went, had a class, did a 2-week program in 14 days, had a lady come in, blood sugar was right at 400. She was on insulin, she was on metformin. In 14 days, she was off insulin, off metformin, as her blood glucose was 115 in 14 days. The time before I went, I had a lady, hers was right at 400, insulin, metformin. In 14 days, she was at 124. Now, we hadn't plumb got there yet because both ladies still were not at ideal body weight. And so they stay on the program we talked about last night, which is the restorative program, until they're at ideal body weight. They got an A1C of 5.6 or less. They got a morning fasting of 99 or less, and they're off meds. Then they come off that program and they go to the Cornell program, which is the whole food plant-based diet with variety. But they stay on the meds until they're safe. Now let's talk type 1 diabetes. I haven't figured out a way to plumb get rid of type 1 diabetes. Yes, there's some things, who remembers Milton Crane? Milton Crane at Loma Linda. Tremendous guy. He was like a thrash. He was like a churney, just loved to educate. And Crane told me, he says, Walt, if I can catch it in the honeymoon period, often I have reversed type 1 diabetes. I said, okay, what do you do? He says, one, what's the cause? Was dairy. At Cornell, we learned dairy was the cause. Number two, he says, niacinamide. Go to the New Zealand study. Just type in niacinamide, New Zealand study, type 1 diabetes, type 1 diabetes. And you will find milligrams, 2 kilograms of weight, and it's a very low dose. And then he found that when they ate, exercise them real hard after they eat. Now, normally we don't do that. But for this, Crane did this. And if he could catch it within, especially the first 8 months of onset, that honeymoon period, he literally could reverse type 1 diabetes. Now, he was at Loma Linda. The problem is catching it at onset, because parents don't pay no attention to their kids. They just don't pay attention. And usually they were outside of honeymoon period when finally it's bad enough, Crane said, to finally catch it, and then it's too late. You can also look at a program called Simply Raw. Simply Raw. And Dr. Cousins is the doctor. And remember the black fellow on there. He was in his early 30s. And they thought he was a type 2. He was actually a type 1, and it reversed in that program. That fella has gone on to get his doctorate degree and now helps people with type 1 diabetes, like it helped him. But overall, we have not figured out fully type 1 diabetes physiology. So does that mean we stop insulin? No. What does it say? When physicians understand physiology in its truest sense, so their use of drugs will be much and much less. Did it say plumb stop it? No. It said they will be less and less, and finally they will cease to use them at all. When? When we fully understand physiology. And we don't fully understand physiology. An example, type 1. Now, I believe this is a promise. I believe if we will stop spending as much time on pharmacology, spend more time on physiology, not saying you have to plumb stop, but let's study physiology more. Based on this promise, we could possibly stop using medications. But then, how many of y'all know Franklin Cobos? Franklin's over in Crossville. Franklin started out in emergency medicine. When he left Loma Linda, and he read this and read the writings and regarding pharmaceuticals, and Franklin said, if I'm an ER doc, I'm just not doing what I need to do here. So he went into anesthesia. Maybe someday we'll figure out how to do anesthesia without medication. Practice on me. So, how many of y'all been to Chickamauga Battlefield? Chickamauga Battlefield is the largest battlefield in the United States. And it's right near where my grandparents live in Fort Oglethorpe. One Sabbath afternoon, Marilyn and I were riding bicycles around. And we went into the battlefield. It's beautiful there to ride around on Sabbath afternoon. Well, they were doing a reenactment. So we went into the Snodgrass House, which the South had taken over. What's the word they use? I can't remember the word, but anyway, they'd taken over it. And they used the Snodgrass House as a hospital, field hospital for the South. And interesting, a guy called me several years ago from Texas wanting to know something. And he'd found me somewhere and called me for some help. And I asked him his name. He said his name was Snodgrass. Snodgrass. I've only heard that name one other place. Are you kin to the Snodgrasses at Chickamauga Battlefield? I go, oh, yes. That was my great, whatever grandparents. I said, are you serious? Well, I went into the Snodgrass House, which was the field hospital for the South, and there was a kitchen table, and it had 4 things on the table. It had a black bag. What was that? Doctor's bag. It had a saw. It was about that long with little teeth on it. You know what that's for? And then it had a bottle of whiskey. And I told the guy, I said, I know what those first 3 things are for, but what's that 4th thing for? He said, that's when the whiskey doesn't work. And it was a ball-peen hammer. I said, now you got a subdural hematoma. So if you want to just say, Mrs. White, do away with all medicine now, who wants a subdural hematoma when you're driving home and have a compound fracture and they got to operate on your leg? So until Franklin figures out how to do surgery, well, the surgeon's doing the surgery and Franklin's putting you to sleep. But until then, I want anesthesia if they're fixing my leg. Does that make sense? Now, I'm not saying that they won't someday because it's possible here. But when folks say it's a sin to use medications, well, if there's a way to do it naturally, I think we should do it naturally. But if we ain't figured it out, the physiology that is, we're going to sometimes need some medicine. Or that little child's going to die from type 1 diabetes, not giving him the insulin. And so you got to read everything. The physician who depends on drugs, means he's only looking at the drugs and not continuing to learn physiology. That's the problem. In his practice shows that he does not understand the delicate machinery of the human organism. Well, it's just he doesn't understand physiology yet. Does that answer that question? So yes, I believe we should use less and less medication, as it says. If there's natural things to use, do that. But if we ain't figured it out yet, if it's a life-saving issue, I think we need to use the medication. Optimal immunity, how to achieve it. We're going to look at what is the immune system. We're going to look at things not to do, things to do, and things to take. The immune system distinguishes self from non-self and eliminates potential harmful non-self molecules and cells from the body. The immune system also has the capacity to recognize and destroy abnormal cells that derive from host tissues. Any molecule capable of being recognized by the immune system is considered an antigen. The skin, the cornea, and mucosa of the respiratory and gastrointestinal tract form a physical barrier that is the body's first line of defense. Some of these bacteria also have active immune functions. I'm reading from Merck Manual. Things not to do. There's a guy, his name was, he was the top surgeon in Philadelphia in this field, and then he worked night in trauma. And he told me, he said, you got to do a couple things to gain health. One is you have to protect the blood. He said, bottom line, 2 things. Did I mention this last night? Sometimes I don't. I teach this all day long at work. So when healthcare folks come in. So the first thing he said is make sure the blood is pure. Don't put anything in it that may taint it. What's some things that can taint the blood? Alcohol, illicit drugs, sugar, and even as anybody ever hunt? I'm not a hunter, but any of y'all ever hunt? Okay, so let's you go hunting. And if you make that animal real upset, can it taint the blood? It can ruin it, taint it. Does that get in the blood? It does. As its adrenaline jumps up as whatever you're rushing that deer, whatever, it can ruin that meat. Well, when we don't control this, our thoughts, as we talked about earlier, can that then affect what's in the blood? Yes, it can. Those hormones and different things that are in the blood. He says you have to stop anything as much as possible from getting into the blood and harming the blood. Then you have to provide the blood what it needs. Fats, proteins, carbohydrates, vitamins, which are a catalyst that makes the fats, proteins, and carbohydrates work. Then a catalyst, minerals. Minerals are a catalyst that kick on the vitamins, which are the catalyst that kicks on fats, proteins, carbohydrates. You got to have water, you got to have hormones, you got to have oxygen. The good stuff has to be in there. So you have to have blood that is that 115% octane, like that Hellcat, that yellow Hellcat we looked at earlier. That's the first thing. Then he says we have to have adequate perfusion, adequate blood flow. And if you do not have adequate perfusion, you just can't heal. And so you've got to have good blood, keep the bad stuff from getting in it, provide the blood what it needs, and then increase perfusion. What are things we can do to increase perfusion? Exercise. Yeah. You can also do hydrotherapy. You can do far infrared. There's a lot of things we can do. Exercise is the easiest. It's very cheap. Just walk. Just clap your hands. Rub your ears. Pat your arms. There's a number of things you can do to increase perfusion. So things not to do when we look at immune system, top 3, sugar. Does sugar mess with the immune system? Yeah. I remember Neil Nedley. Who's read his book, Proof Positive? In there he says that just a 12-ounce soft drink will lower your immune system 50% up to 4 hours. Then he says if you take just a Snickers bar, he said Snickers bar. Now we're not talking the ones this day. We're talking the ones when we were kids, that big. He says an average 12-ounce soft drink, a small Snickers bar, will anesthetize 13 of 14 white cells. So you got one guy working. So let's say I'm not into competitive sports anymore. I used to be, but I'm no longer. But let's say you're playing basketball. The competition has 14 players. I know there's not 14 players, but they have 14 players. And you got one person. Unless you're some highfalutin, Michael Jordan or whoever they are, you don't have a chance. And so Nedley talks about when we eat that sugar, it takes out our immune system. Nedley says if the average milkshake, just regular size, one slice of cheesecake, he said wipes out the immune system, it's like 92 or 93% for up to 4 hours. The next one is stress. In there he talks about 1 minute of anger wipes out the immune system significantly for 6 hours. Now, how many of y'all know Arvo Khanna? George, you know Arvo? Arvo Khanna. Arvo's a neurologist, and he specializes in brain function. And Arvo and I were actually teaching this class one time together. And I asked Arvo before we got up there, I said, Arvo, Neil says that just 1 minute of stress can wipe out the immune system significantly for 6 hours. I said, Neil, you know the brain. Is the same physiological thing going on with 1 minute of anger as 1 minute of stress to do that situation of wiping out the immune system? He says, yeah, it's about the same. I said, so then could I say 1 minute of major stress wipes out the immune system for up to 6 hours? Would that be accurate? And Arvo goes, yeah. So as we look at stress, stress raises cortisol, it lowers potassium, it raises adrenaline. We dump all kinds of nutrients like vitamin C, vitamin E, zinc, just a number of things from the immune system side. Sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is huge on blowing our immune system. And I was reading Harvard one time. Harvard said sleep deprivation is equal to or similar to the same effect as stress. Sugar. Besides being a driver behind the chronic health conditions like diabetes and heart disease, sugar consumption affects one's body's ability to fight off viruses or other infections in the body. White blood cells, also known as killer cells, are highly affected by sugar consumption. Sugar hinders the immune system by not allowing for eating processed food is to be expected to cause problems. For the brain, could we say that eating processed sugar is to be expected to affect our immune system? It's to be expected. If you took arsenic, it would be expected that there would be a negative outcome. Yeah. The average American eats approximately 22 teaspoons of sugar each day, 150 pounds of sugar per week, and 79 pounds of HFCS per year. What's HFCS? Yeah, that stuff's in. Line you up across here. And then I said, I want you to stand from the tallest to the shortest. And it went Henry, George, and George and Sam were the same height, so I'd say George and Sam were the same height, so I'd put an and in there. But Henry's taller, so I'd put a comma in there. When you look at ingredients, if there's a comma, the word on the left, the first word is what? Peanuts. The second word is what? Sugar. But what is in between that? A comma or an and? An and. So you could legally call Jif peanut butter Jif sugar butter. Yes? It's the same amount of stuff in there. So look at your ingredients. Read those ingredients. It's very important to read ingredients. Whether it's good or bad? Bad. Yes, aspartame is not a good thing for us.
What about stevia?
Stevia is good. I personally like stevia just in the herb itself. How many of y'all know Melody Prettyman? Yep, Melody Prettyman Cabanis. She's on 3ABN. She does a lot with Chef Anthony. Melody came by one time, and she's from Texas, and she was talking about how she missed sweet tea. And y'all know what sweet tea is? Sweet tea. And I said, Melody, I can fix you some sweet tea. Healthy. She says, how? I said, well, just a minute. I'll go make you some. So I went back in the deli, and I got me a mason jar, and I poured her up a quart of water, brought it to a boil, plumb turned it off, and I put a heaping teaspoon of stevia leaves in there. The green, it looks like peppermint leaves, just chopped up, cut and sifted. Put it in there, and it steeped for 30 minutes. I poured it off, and went back and talked to her, went back and poured it off, and I took it to her, and I said, what do you think? And it's like sweet tea. All it is stevia leaves. And she's now got her sweet tea again. It has 0 glycemic index, a type 1. Type 2 has no problem with it. You can take that water and use it in other ingredients to use it. If you want to make a tea, I don't think anything's going to help chaparral. Who's had chaparral before? Nasty, isn't it? Yeah, you need a clothespin for that one. It is nasty. But chaparral is a very, very powerful herb. But if you want to sweeten your herbs, put you about a half a teaspoon per quart of stevia leaf. You can use the white stuff, but a lot of times it has an aftertaste. So if you want to get rid of the aftertaste, just make your stuff from the leaf itself. So stevia is a good product. Okay, but high fructose corn syrup, it's in from pickles to ketchup. Many of today's illnesses and diseases are triggered by chronic stress, which depresses the immune system and wreaks havoc on every organ system in the body. Psychology Today. What does stress do? It wreaks havoc on every organ system in the body. Now, what is the best protocol for stress? For that right there? Trusting God. Trusting God is the best. Had a lady come in one time. Excuse me, that ran down the wrong way. Lady comes in. It's a Friday morning. I'm at work. Mary Lou's up at the mountain. She's doing homeschool. Wow. I'm helping 4 ladies. Lady walks in. She's dressed like a gypsy. She looks like a whoop dog. I mean, she looked bad. She walks around, comes around behind the counter, and she says, "You Walt?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She says, "They told me you could help me." And I could just look at her and knew it was going to take some time. And I was by myself. And I said, "Ma'am, if you can come back Monday morning at 8 o'clock, I'll be here and I'll sit down and talk with you." She said, "Okay." She walks back around, and she's walking around. She looks at me and she says, "I'm going to be the worst case you ever dealt with." She walks on out and left. Monday morning, she was there right on time. 8 o'clock. She sits down. I sit down, and we start talking. She'd been to a psychologist, and the therapy hadn't worked. She'd been to a psychiatrist. The drugs didn't work. And someone told her maybe the herbs I had might help her out. And she said just a lot going on in her head. So we started talking, asking about a history. Tell me about your nutrition. Tell me about your exercise. Tell me about, going through a basic history, other health problems. And she stopped me. She says, "I need to tell you something." I said, "What's that?" She said, "I can make things levitate. You believe me?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I do." And she then didn't say nothing. So I continued on. What do you think I did? I started praying. Do you believe people can make things levitate? Yeah. And so she starts talking more, and we continue on, asking about, lifestyle issues about her. And she says, "I need to tell you something else." "Okay, what's that?" She says, "See that new building over there? This has been 20 years ago this spring. See that building over there? O'Reilly's Auto Parts, just built a new one." She says, "I've never been in there, but I can tell you everything in there exactly where it is. Do you believe me?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I do." Do I have confirmation? Yeah. I do. I have confirmation. So I start changing gears, start going a different direction. Yes, we need to talk about some physiological things, some things that she can take to help the physiology of her brain. But what does she really need to hear about? I said, Jesus. She started shaking like she was having a seizure. I said, "Ma'am, what's wrong with you?" And she says, "They don't like that word." And she was just shaking. I said, "Okay." And she calmed down. And I continued on. I thought, well, let me test something. And I said, "God." She did not shake. Showed me how much more Satan and his demons, his angels, hate Jesus than God. We continued on, and I thought, well, let me test it again. You test in science, right, George? You do it, and then you test again. So I tested again. Jesus. She started shaking again. So I told her about some things she could do that she could take home that could help her brain work well. And I said, here's what I want you to do. Every time they start talking to you, I want you to say, "In Jesus' name, Satan, get thee behind me." I said, I don't care if you say it for 20 minutes. You just keep saying it until they quit talking to you. Now, we got up and I said, I want you to come back next Monday morning and at 8 o'clock. We're walking out. And does God ever say you need to do something? The week before, 2 Gideons had come by and gave me a little white New Testament. And it was like, give her that. So I went over there and I picked it up and I said, ma'am, I want you to read this between now and next Monday. She said, okay. She left. She came back the next Monday. She looked like a whole different woman. Now, she's still dressed real weird. Her hair looked like, I don't know what. It was weird. I don't know what it was. But her face, her countenance was a different woman. She comes in. I said, ma'am, how are you doing? Oh, she also told me that first week that she was being picked up at night out of bed and thrown against the wall. And things I did not even know happened. And I confirmed it later with her husband. And he said, yes. He'd lay there and all of a sudden his wife would come up out of the bed, hit the wall and fall down.
Situations in Buffalo where one of the elders had a daughter that was messing around with those Pokemon cards. And the pastor, before I came, he testified. He said that they went in the house and things were flying all around in that house.
Yes.
And they went and got somebody from LA and brought him. And I don't know what he did, but they said that he was able to bring that house under control.
She looked like a different lady. Calm, her countenance. And I said, how you doing? And she said, she says, I'm doing well. I said, are they talking to you anymore? And she says, no, they can't talk to me. I said, why? She said, when I start saying that, what you said, after a while they can't talk to me anymore when I say that. I asked her, I said, did you read that little book? She says, yes, I especially liked the first 4 books in that book. Now, what does that mean, especially, the word especially? She'd read more than the first 4 books. I said, why did you like the first 4 books in that book? She said, because it talks about Jesus. And she did not shake. So as we look at issues here, many of today's illnesses and diseases are triggered by chronic stress, which depresses the immune system and wreaks havoc on every organ in the system. When you're stressed, and there's stressful issues, back a month ago, 2 months ago, there was something that just really stressed me. Now, I'm a weird personality. I want things just like they should be. And it wasn't. And it was driving me nuts. On the way home, I'm thinking, there ain't no way I'm going to sleep tonight. I am so stressed about this. Okay. I started saying it. All the way from Newport, 35 minutes till I got up on the mountain to the house. I said it. Mary Lou left me alone. She knew I was stressed. She just wanted time to talk. And I just kept saying it. The whole 35 minutes up the mountain to the cabin. I got out of the truck. I thought, okay, let's test it. I quit saying it in my mind. The thoughts were totally gone. I slept perfect that night. Can it work? It can work. Is He there to provide that for us? He is. Did it work for Jesus when He said, Satan, get thee behind me? It does. Exactly how stress causes and contributes to the disease is a question of particular interest to researchers. There are 2 likely pathways. One is behavioral. People under stress sleep poorly and are less likely to exercise. They adopt poor eating habits, smoke more, and don't comply with medical treatment. Stress also triggers a response by the body's endocrine system, which releases hormones that influence multiple other biological systems, including the immune systems. This is Carnegie Mellon University. And here's that one that Neil had. This is Neil's picture. 1 minute of anger suppresses your immune system for 6 hours. But Arvo Khanna, Dr. Arvo Khanna, a neurologist who specializes in the brain, he said the same thing's physiologically happening with stress also. So he says yes, he would, with no question, change that word, substitute it for the word stress. Sleep deprivation. Sleep provides essential support to the immune system. Getting sufficient hours of sleep, of high quality sleep, enable a well-balanced immune defense that features strong innate and adaptive immunity and less severe allergic reactions. Lack of sleep can affect your immune system. This is Mayo Clinic. Studies show that people who do not get quality sleep or enough sleep, and what's the difference in quality and enough? Enough is number of hours. Quality, are you getting that REM sleep? So many people start off sleep. They tell me they go to sleep 10 o'clock and then they wake up at 1. Are they getting into good REM sleep? And then they may wake up several times and it starts over. They're not getting that full, as Mayo calls it, that quality sleep. Are more likely to get sick after being exposed to a virus, such as a common cold virus. Lack of sleep can also affect how fast you recover if you do get sick. How many of y'all know Dan Castro? Anybody know Dan? He's internal medicine. He and Arvo were the same group at Loma Linda. Dan, what he found with his patients with COVID was when his patients finally were coming out of COVID, to where folks say, okay, you can go back to work. Dan said, do not go back to work. Stay in bed another 3 days. He found the best result was just rest 3 more days, because he found they were more prone to have relapse or have health issues. Just plumb rest. It's so important. So things not to do: sugar, stress, sleep deprivation, poor diet, vitamin D deficiency, alcohol, obesity, smoking, dehydration, internet addiction. Is that a word? Is that a diagnosis? Pardon?
It's Facebook.
That's Facebook, yeah. Let's look at a poor diet. Diets that are limited in variety and lower in nutrients, such as consisting primarily of ultra-processed foods, can negatively affect a healthy immune system. It is also believed that a Western diet, high in refined sugars and red meat and low in fruits and vegetables, can promote disturbances in healthy intestinal microorganisms. And we talked about that earlier today, the gut biome, resulting in chronic inflammation of the gut and associated suppressed immunity. We've been listening over the last several years, and they're saying that possibly 75% of our immune system is based on gut biome. And MIT is doing some really interesting research on gut biome. They're actually finding that by addressing gut biome, they're able to get rid of some of these chronic diseases. And MIT is not that local community college, and I'm not speaking negative on community colleges. They can be good. But MIT does some good work in research. Yes?
Dr. Eric Nelson shared recently, he's a colorectal surgeon in Chattanooga.
Oh, hang on a sec. They want to put you on the mic. People can't hear you out there.
So one of my colleagues, Dr. Eric Nelson, and by the doctors never agree on everything in every aspect, but it's he shared some great insights that like a lot of people are taking probiotics just religiously, and he says you rarely need that unless you just had antibiotics. So the prebiotics and just your healthy diet is what's really going to help your GI, help that all that GI flora, which is they're still figuring things out. There's a lot of things that they're just now getting some genetics. There's not many footprints. There's like thousands and thousands of varieties of bacteria. So remind you, try to drag your feet. Don't take antibiotics unless you really, really need to, and get off as quick as you can. And probiotics briefly while you're on it, but the prebiotics and healthy diet seems to be, and other things, just healthy lifestyle to help that.
And the prebiotics is like food to what's in our gut flora. Yeah. Yeah. It goes back to the basics. that prevention and following those 8 laws of health, eating that good, healthy diet to start with, can make a huge difference. Yes, ma'am.
Wait, on the mic. Can you use the mic? They're asking, we're always in the mic because there's people on the line.
What are some natural forms of probiotics?
We know some of the yogurts, sauerkraut, yes. I don't like, my concern with dairy, after learning from Campbell at Cornell, the challenges with dairy, so I'm cautious on the dairy. We learned at Cornell that dairy is the most significant chemical carcinogen ever discovered. According to Cornell's research, dairy increases a child's risk of type 1 diabetes 1,100%. So I'm not as prone to use dairy yogurt, but yes, you can make a sauerkraut, homemade sauerkraut, and that does have probiotics in.
Okay, can we, we're going to have a question and answer right after, so if you
Okay.
can write your questions down, he'll be happy to answer them at the end.
Okay. The next one is vitamin D deficiency. Deficiency in vitamin D is associated with increased autoimmune and increased susceptibility to infection. Research shows that vitamin D plays an important role in the immune function, and a deficiency in it is shown to increase one's susceptibility to infection. Your vitamin D deficiency can mean your immune system is more vulnerable. This is Pharmacy Times. Low levels of vitamin D have also been associated with frequent infections. In 2009, the National Institute of Health warned that low vitamin D levels are associated with frequent colds and influenza. Alcohol. Alcohol compromises. And as we mentioned earlier, vitamin D, it's not how much you take, is the thing you want to look at. Look at what your blood level is, and then go from there on what you do. Alcohol compromises the body's immune system and increases the risk of adverse health outcomes. And there's many reasons for alcohol. There's sugar in alcohol. But sometimes, as the kids, when I go into the school system, and I ask the kids, what does alcohol do? And they'll tell me consistently, year after year, it makes mommy and daddy do stupid things, which can compromise the immune system. Alcohol can trigger inflammation in the gut and destroy the microorganisms that live in intestinal and maintain immune system health. That's PubMed. Is saying that alcohol can trigger inflammation in the gut and destroy microorganisms. This is Cambridge University talking about obesity. Obesity, like other states of malnutrition. Now, how can you be obese and be malnourished? Don't they have plenty of... I had a guy come in to me one time. He was 572 pounds. I said, what do you eat? You'd think, this man's nourished, isn't he? Well, he's eating calorie-dense food, not nutritionally dense food. And many times those folks, and I don't know what they eat here, but a lot of times it's pizza, soft drinks, it's French fries, it's fast food, it's hot dogs, hamburgers. Pardon? So yes, soft drinks, yes. They're just not eating food with nutrients. It's calorie dense. But just because a person's big doesn't mean they're well fed. Smoking. Smoking harms the immune system and can make the body less successful at fighting disease. Dehydration. These results suggest that dehydration results in immunosuppression, I can't even talk right now, immunosuppression, including decreased neutrophil function. Internet addiction. Internet addiction can damage immune function. Who's ever done some of Scott Resmith's programs? Scott Resmith? Little Light Industries, or in Little Light Studios? Yeah. What's some, the one on the brain? Media on the Brain. I encourage y'all to watch those. Excellent, what Scott's put out there. Internet addiction can damage immune function. People with excessive internet use have 30% more cold and flu symptoms than those with less problematic usage. This is from, I have no idea what that says. University of whatever, something. Yeah, it ain't from around here. Those who spend excessive time on the internet tend to have greater sleep deprivation, worse eating habits, and less healthy habits, and a less healthy diet, engage in less exercise, tend to smoke and drink alcohol more. It's just when a person's stuck on internet, they just don't do healthy things. They're just addicted to the internet. Scott says that media is the #1 addiction in America. And I believe it. Have you tried to talk to kids today? They don't even hear you. And you can get adults that they're totally zoned out when they hit. It's like they're zoned on a drug. They're zoned on what they're reading. And they lose consciousness of what's around them. So these are things not to do, things to do. Prayer. Would you agree? Prayer. WHO recommends recommendations, and then doing a healthy diet, hydrotherapy. So let's look at prayer. And we're not going to do this. This is homework. I encourage you to go home and read Psalms 91 and Psalms 103. When you're looking at building your body, go to God. God's the medical director. He is. Does He want you to be healthy? Does He want you to be the most you can be so that you can point the sin-sick soul to Christ? Just ask Him. And remember Him talking about the Bible when folks asked for something and they got it, but He said, if you'd asked this even more, I would have given you even more. Do you want your children to ask for things? You do? I want my kids, if they need help, I want my kids to ask for help. God wants us to ask Him for help. I have people who come in to see me, and they tell me, I say, can I pray for you? No, we can't pray to God about that. Why? Because God's too busy for my little health issues. Is God too busy for that? I had this girl come in. Did I talk about the girl that said she couldn't go to church? She was from Sevier County. She came in. She had stopped an illicit drug, cold turkey, and she was having some huge health issues from that. Not to go to the same hospital in the same county, so she came over to our county and went to our hospital. Went to the ED, told them what was going on. They said, we don't treat that problem. Go over and see Walt at the mustard seed, see if he can help you. So she came over, and we sat down. And we start talking about, what's going on, what can she do. And I said, where do you go to church? She says, I can't go to church. I said, why can't you go to church? She says, because I'm not perfect. I said, what do you mean? She says, only perfect people can go to church. I said, ma'am, a church is a hospital for sick people, sin-wise. I said, you ever heard of David? I said, you ever kill somebody? I asked her, I said, you ever kill somebody? No. She looked at me like I was weird. I said, this guy killed somebody. I said, this guy got this woman, got her pregnant, and then killed her husband. And God said he was a man after His own heart. And I gave her a story. I talked about Paul. And I talked about different folks in the Bible who were bad and they came right. And again, I said, you didn't kill nobody, did you? She says, no. I said, you're good. Even the guy who killed somebody. Sometimes you got to, you know what I'm saying? And so, and I won't tell you the rest of the story. She did very well. But sometimes people they think they're too hard of a case. Or they don't think they're important enough. If God cares for the sparrows, He cares for you. And He is there to help you if you will be helped by Him. You have to be willing. You do. WHO. Wash your hands regularly. I used to say, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. We're finding out maybe we can wash our hands sometimes too much. But wash soap and water kills some pathogens. Alcohol rub can help deal others. One doesn't kill all of them, so if you don't get both of them, you can use both of them. But be careful, you can wash your hands too much, we've learned. Practice respiratory hygiene. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing. Throw the tissue into a closed bin. Remember when we were youngins and you'd have a snotty little nose? And Granddaddy pull out that handkerchief and say, here. And then to your sibling, go, he might just go ahead and do it himself too. Stick it back in the pocket. Don't do it no more. That's not healthy. Throw it away. Don't use that. And then wash your hands. Maintain social distancing. I was flying back from Rwanda. The doors were closing. And as I mentioned at dinner, I got back a day and a half before the doors closed. Or I would have been stuck over there at least 6 months. So I'm searching, and they got this thing going on, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. So I'm on the plane going through what CDC recommendations. At that time, CDC only said 1 meter, 3 feet. But then it became 2 meters, 6 feet. Avoid touching your eyes, mouth, nose. Why? You got holes in there. And stuff can get inside you. Mask and personal protective equipment, according to CDC, if you're sick, when caring for someone who is sick in a healthcare setting. If you're unwell, stay home. If you have fever, cough, or difficulty breathing, seek early medical care. A healthy diet. A balanced diet consisting of a range of vegetables and vitamins and minerals most effectively prime the body to fight infection and disease. Harvard School of Public Health. It's just amazing what happens when we provide the body with healthy food. Yes, George? Where's that?
Just some things I've come across from really solid sources. We're living in a strange time. America's going to fall away. But a lot of these agencies, their data is just not sticking up. I mean, if you're in a room, the virus is in there for hours. So this 6 feet net made no sense. Even now they're saying that alcohol sanitizer, a lot of these things aren't really well manufactured and not tested, and really soap and water is the only way to go.
Okay.
But there are some nasal irrigations. I can talk to folks later on, but there's a 10% solution. You can go down to 1% and make easy at home, or you can buy some those things and just some mouthwash like Scope and Crest. That'll kill COVID. It had to be in your nose 3 days to die. And so it's a little embarrassing because out of 1 million doctors, only 500,000 of us would give people ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and not encourage these COVID injections that have been very toxic. So anyhow, I just wanted to clarify a few things for people who are gone, but that distancing, you need to be around people. But use your nasal spray, your mouthwash, your fresh air, your immune system, and you'll probably do well, or you'll catch and you'll get over it. Mm-hmm. So don't let fear run your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Amen.
Thanks, George. Eating enough nutrients as part of a varied diet is required for health and function of all cells, including immune function. Dr. Campbell was very, very clear at Cornell. Whole food, plant-based with what? Variety. Now, let me share a story that Dr. Campbell told us. And it's very important for every parent and every grandparent. Campbell goes into the study of the China study to prove we need more meat and we need more dairy. That is his hypothesis. He's supported by the American Dairy Association. He's supported by the American Meat Association. Cornell's very supportive of it. As Campbell said, as he started looking at the numbers, and he said, I had the best statisticians. I had the best number crunchers to make sure I had good research, because this was going to be the most comprehensive nutrition study ever done, the China study. But he said as we got into it, and when the data started coming back, he says, I was 180% wrong. I was 180%, I was 300% wrong, but it was 180 degrees different. And he said, I'm trying to figure out what to do. I'm supported by the industries. I'm supported by Cornell. He himself wanted that theory to be proved, but it was just the opposite. What does he do? He said, I could change the numbers. Y'all, who took statistics? They taught us to play with numbers and statistics. I took stats at UT. They taught us how to play numbers and jerk them all over the place. So you got to learn how those numbers came about. Look who's funding. And you know what a mind's eye is? Have you ever said, you could visualize something from years ago, or you could hear something from years ago, or you could smell something from years ago? At that point, he said, I could hear my father's voice saying, Colin, never lie. Colin, never lie. He said it 2 times. And he said, based on that, he said, I chose to publish the truth. If that hadn't happened, we would not have had the China study as we know it today. We would not have had the term plant-based, because T. Colin Campbell coined that word. But as grandparents and parents, to teach our children, never lie. Just don't do it. And based on what his father taught him on that little farm in Southwest Virginia, stuck. And years later, he changed a lot. It's amazing. Hydrotherapy. Using hot, cold contrast showers, bathing, or fomentations can powerfully optimize immune function and greatly stimulate antibody production against viral and other forms of infection. Youngberg Clinic. As we look at hydrotherapy, when I just started college, this was in 79 or 80, there was this old man, and he was 97 years old, and he was a nurse in his career. He says, Walt, you're going into healthcare. I need to tell you something that someday you might need to know. He says, in 1917, he said, we were losing, he was a nurse for the United States Army. He said, we were losing a lot of men. They were dying. If you read the Battle Creek documents, they talk about nurses being taken away at night, in the dark of the night, to go treat soldiers, because they did not want the enemy to know that we were having a problem with soldiers being as sick as they were. He said, we tried all kinds of things, and the boys were dying. And he said there was only one thing that stopped them from dying with the influenza of 1918. And he said it's hot and cold fomentations to the chest. He said that was the best thing that the United States Army found. Hot and cold fomentations are amazing. How you do it, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. So I hope you come tomorrow, and I'll show you how you do those hot and cold fomentations. Very, very beneficial, increasing the immune system. You can do, hydrotherapy is not just fomentations. You can do saunas. And other countries have it on us. What do they call them in Alaska? Those little places where yeah, but there's a special word they have for it. What? Yes, Mackay. So almost every little home has it. Now, white man has some of them, but the Eskimos say that's a white man one. It's different than ours. But the Eskimos have the Mackays, and you go in there, it's pretty cool. Well, it's not cool, it's hot, but anyway, it's pretty neat. And you're a sweating. And if it's wintertime, you go out and roll around in the snow and get back in there. In the summertime, they got real cold water up there. And they just douse you with cold water. And then you go back in again, back and forth. The Russians, a couple of weeks ago, I was in Winnipeg, in the house I stayed with, the ladies from Russia. And I was asking her, do y'all use hot and cold in Russia? Oh, yes. We go in, we have hot, and then we go out and roll around in the snow, and we come back in and get in the hot. So they do that in Russia.
Do they do it enough to where they get used to it? I've tried.
I think the Eskimos did because they speak awful high of it. But they do it a lot. It's huge in building the immune system. Things to take, there's all kinds of things you can take for building your immune system, the vitamin D, the garlic, the onions, oil of oregano. Oil of oregano is one of my favorite. Oil of oregano is like a 357 Magnum. I mean, that thing is amazing. Now, do not do oregano oil. Do oil of oregano. Pure 100% oregano, you don't want to do that. It's too hot. Take 25% oil of oregano, 75% olive oil, mix it, or you can buy it that way. But literally, if I feel like I'm starting to catch something, I will go and I'll put, don't do what I do. I put 10 drops under, and you think I'm trying to kill you. But start with 3. Put them under your tongue, put it in water and drink it. But oil of oregano is very powerful. You know how you feel like you're starting to catch sick? Here. You feel like a cow sitting on top of you. You just feel like you're getting sick. That's when to do it. It's called the incipient stage. We use that in firefighting. When a fire is just starting to start, it's the incipient stage. When it's just beginning, right there, nip it in the bud, as Barney said. And I find it the most success. One morning I woke up and I was just not feeling right. And I looked in my dresser beside me. I've got a little nightstand. I didn't have any. I looked over, Mary Lou, she was plumb out. And it was, 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that. I got in my vehicle, drove back down the mountain, 35 minutes to the office, got me some, took it, drove back up the mountain, and went back to bed. Now I had some at the house. But literally, it's that effective for me. If I keep waiting till that next morning, I can get sick. That's just how my body is. That oil of oregano is very powerful. Pardon?
Can you make that boiling lemon rinds or maybe grapefruit rinds?
I have been told that. I never have. George, what do you know on that?
I've heard it, haven't seen the recipe, so it's probably a good thing to learn. It's really cheap, so I don't know. There's some things you do some study. It's probably good to do some prepping. It's dirt cheap, so buy it now and learn to make it later.
Yeah.
But there's some great tools. And by the way, the World Health Organization, there's a lot of questions out there, so we can talk about some things later. But
Yeah.
but it's you can learn to make, but sometimes you have to pay cash. Sometimes your insurance won't pay for it now because it's so good they don't want to give it to you.
Yes.
And like the ivermectin, if you ever choose to get that, it's amazing stuff. And y'all may look, there's a thing called the universal antidote. It's not chlorine dioxide. Now that's something, they call it the universal antidote for a good reason. So y'all would be wise to check into that because it takes out Ebola. It actually cures malaria. I mean, it cures, it takes a lot of stage 4 cancers is what the claims are. But they won't do much medical research on it, but it's been around a long time. That says a lot there, why it's not proven not to work.
Yes. Tomorrow we'll talk about different remedies and how to do them. When your house is on fire, it is not the time to develop a home evacuation plan. You need to know how ahead of time.
If you have different names, do you have any place listed about how much leash you take, a person should take?
I have not got prescriptive here, no, sir. I haven't identified. We can talk later about that. Zinc, but one of the problems I saw with zinc is I saw zinc being prescribed by physicians as much as 200 milligrams, but not using copper with it. If you take high doses of zinc, you've got to take copper because you're going to lower your copper taking that amount of zinc if you're doing it, for a while. Vitamin C, vitamin C is just huge. It's just huge. B6, vitamin E, elderberry, astragalus, echinacea, iodine, NAC. There's just a number of things that we can use for building the immune system. But I would much rather not look at this list. I would rather look at the first list on things not to do and then natural things you can do. That's my recommendation. Well, I'll tell you what. Now there was a request to do something on how to put together a medical missionary program at a church. There was a request for some question and answers. Do we need to take a break for a few minutes? And
Can we do the Q&A first, because not everybody knows
okay.
all the other.
So you want to do the Q&A then the break? And
No, you can do the break first.
okay. So how long do you want to do for break?
It's up to you.
Y'all call it. I'm here to help.
Why don't we try to get back by 10 till, that's in 6 minutes.
Okay? You got 6 minutes. I'm going to go outside and walk in fresh air. Of course, oh yeah, it's good. Yeah, absolutely. Oh yes. Excuse me. How's Melody?